trainers. They're in harm's way. We're dropping bombs on Syria. We're dropping bombs in Iraq. This has been going on for months now. It's the leadership in the House, Boehner and McCarthy, etc., that will not allow President Obama to come to Congress and make his argument for war. Why?
Well, John, I'm equally frustrated. I'm going to give another floor speech about it today. It's probably about the seventh or eighth floor speech I've given on this since I first wrote an op-ed almost exactly a year ago. It was almost a year to the day that I wrote an op-ed saying the president started to send troops into Iraq in June. Bombing campaign started in August, but I said, look, if we're going to be at war here, Congress has got to vote. And frankly, it's the leadership in both parties and both houses that does not want to do it. We're those of us who feel like we shouldn't be at war without Congress are having to fight the leadership in both parties and both houses. And the only answer you could really come up with is that people got no backbone up here, that war's unpopular, war's difficult, even under the ideal circumstances where the enemy is completely clear and the rules of war are clear, and you have a just cause and the mission is simple to define to people, you're still going to have negative consequences. You still have the possibility of people dying, and could be unpopular. So members of Congress want to avoid a hard vote, and that's why this has been so difficult. Now, there is an increasing drumbeat among the members. Hey, you got to be kidding me. We're now in the 11th month of war. It's cost about $2.5 billion, 3,500 airstrikes with the new advisors that will take it up to over 3,500 troops deployed in harm's way. Service members' lives have been lost. American hostages have been killed, and ISIL isn't going away. So there was the first debate in the floor of the House at all in 11 months happened yesterday over an amendment that a Democratic Congressman McGovern proposed that basically said, look, if we're not willing to authorize, we should bring the troops home in a limited amount of time. Now, that amendment failed, but at least it was the first debate on the floor of the House. In the Senate, as you know, I introduced an authorization to authorize this military action in September. It got a committee vote in December, and it was reported out to the floor, but then the floor wouldn't take it up and it died. But now Senator Flake of Arizona and I have introduced a bipartisan resolution. We want to show folks that, look, there's got to be bipartisan support for our troops. And you'll laugh at this. We're debating a defense bill on the floor this week. We'll likely vote on it today. We tried to bring up our amendment on the authorization to the defense bill, and we were told it was non-germane.
What?
We were told it was non-germane. This bill has provisions that we are willing to vote on about how to protect military vehicles from rust, how to install more lights on military runways, how to fight barracks mold in barracks, and we're voting on all of that. But a proposal to vote on war was ruled non-germane, so they won't take it up in the NDAA today. But at least Senator Corker and Cardin, the chair and ranking of Foreign Relations, have promised Senator Flake and I that they will take up our authorization. And we had a planning meeting this week, and I think you'll likely see the committee start to at least take it up. There's no guarantee that the committee will pass it, but you'll see us start to take it up next week. And our goal is, before the one-year anniversary of this war, which is on August 8th, we ought to report out of the Foreign Relations Committee a bipartisan authorization and try to get the Senate to act. So it is beyond frustrating that the president took so long to send up an authorization. It took him 6 months. That's unheard of. And now we're nearly 11 months in, and Congress hasn't said boo about it. And it's an outrage.
What are they afraid of, Senator?
Well, I think they're afraid of getting it wrong and doing something unpopular. And, let's dig into this. The war against ISIL is complicated. It's not a state versus state where our enemy is a state that has to honor the Geneva Conventions. ISIL is a non-state terrorist/criminal syndicate. the two theaters of war. The Iraq theater is a little bit more straightforward because we've been invited in by Iraq to assist them, and even the Iraqi military's got problems, and you've got the Kurdish Peshmerga that are tough fighters in that part of Iraq. But at least we have been invited in, and we have both an Iraqi army and a Kurdish Peshmerga that we can support. But in Syria, which is ISIL's headquarters, we haven't been invited in. Bashar al-Assad doesn't want us in fighting there. There's an ongoing civil war. As you know, you've been keeping the focus of attention on chemical weapons attacks that Bashar al-Assad has been using against his people. You've got not just ISIL, but Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, a whole rat's nest of fractious organizations, and some legitimate, moderate Syrian opposition. But the definition of the mission in Syria is hard. And so up here on the Hill, the thing that's odd is that I bet 3/4 of Congress, Democratic and Republican, both houses, believe that the U.S. military should be engaged to some degree against ISIL. So you would think, well, if that's the case, it would be easy to come up with an authorization. But it is such a complicated situation, and that there are vast differences of opinion between Democrats and Republicans about the extent to which the U.S. military should be involved. And that's why Jeff Flake and I put in a bipartisan authorization. Without trying to solve every difference of opinion, we basically looked at sort of three critical differences: the ground troop issue, the definition of the mission in Syria, and the continuing status of the 2001 authorization, the post-9/11 authorization. And we tried to find bipartisan compromises in all those areas just to show our colleagues that it was possible. Now, they're going to have amendments of their own, but Jeff and I wanted to show everybody that there's a bipartisan path forward, and it looks like next week in Senate Foreign Relations we'll start taking it up.
Well, in this authorization of war and how we handle the ISIS debacle in Syria and Iraq and their advances, I mean, this is not a partisan issue. This isn't Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative. This is just the reality of the world that we have to decide how we're going to handle it. So why wouldn't everybody want to be engaged in a debate?
Well, you would think that they would be, but I mean, I will tell you, John, and I kind of came into Congress a little obsessed about this. The Miller Center at the University of Virginia did a superb study called the National War Powers Commission in 2007-2008, and they looked at the history of how Congress has dealt with these issues of war, and what they concluded is presidents like to overreach and Congresses like to abdicate. You know, if the Congress can even though the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Congress shall have the power to declare war, not the President. Congress shall have the power to declare war, and it's a power that only Congress has. Even though that's been the language since 1787, the study of the history shows that presidents overreach and start military action without Congress, more than 120 times, and that Congresses will prefer if they can get away with it. If the public lets them get away with it, Congresses will prefer not to vote because it's unpopular, or maybe you're wrong. Maybe you vote for a war and then it turns out badly. You go into Iraq to stop weapons of mass destruction, and that's the reason, and then it turns out there weren't weapons of mass destruction. So if Congresses can avoid taking a hard vote and thus they think they can avoid being accountable to their voters, they will do it. And that's why not only am I pushing for an authorization against ISIL, Senator McCain and I are pushing to rewrite the 1973 War Powers Resolution, which is just absolutely and completely toothless. That law is still on the books, and as you know, John, what that law says is a president can begin military action, but then Congress must weigh in within 60 or 90 days, or the military action has to stop. We're now 311 days into a military action that the president has begun, and the action hasn't stopped, and that just shows that the War Powers Resolution is completely specious by this point.
It's a toothless tiger, without a doubt. We had your colleague, Senator Mark Warner, on earlier in the week, Senator Kaine, and he said, look, he's tired of these Iraqi soldiers running away, and he says maybe it's a time that we just admit to the fact that a unified Iraq is not possible. They won't even fight for themselves. Maybe we split the thing up into three sectors. And what do you think of that approach?
Well, it's that is an approach that has some strong support. Senator Warner, Vice President Biden has been saying this for years. I have some concerns about it, but it may end up being the only realistic alternative. I'll tell you the concern I have about it is if you say, look, Iraq probably can't be governed together, so you should split it up, which I really worry about empowering Iran, because what you would have a Shia core of Iraq that would be largely dominated by Iran. You would have a Kurdish region, and the Kurds are great allies of ours, and we work very closely with the Kurds. But then you end up with this Sunni region where they don't have a lot of assets. They don't have a lot of like oil assets in the Sunni region, and I think that they would easily be dominated by Sunni extremists. And then you end up with I think a bubbling just three-way fight between Kurds, Sunnis, and Shias. If there is a way to get an Iraqi central government to try to operate the country as an Iraq for all Iraqis, where Sunni, Shias, and Kurds can all be part of a state together, that should be, I think everyone would agree, that is the preferred. That would be the optimal. Maybe it's not possible, but I'm not willing to give up on it yet.
This trade bill, which I celebrated, as you know, its defeat.
Its demise, yes.
Its demise, and did a little dance and opened the champagne.
But as Mark Twain said, the rumors of my demise are greatly exaggerated. Things never completely go away in this town.
Now like a resurrected zombie or a vampire, it's coming back today, and I am adamantly opposed to this, as you know. We don't have the 5 hours to get into all my reasons. What happens now?
Well, John, you and I think the last time I was on, you and I kind of went back and forth on this one a little bit. I support the president's ability to try to negotiate trade deals that other presidents have had. That's the Trade Promotion Authority. And if the president and his team can get a good deal with the 12 Pacific Rim nations, this Trans-Pacific Partnership, I will be supportive of a good deal. I won't support a bad deal. I think trade's going to happen in this world, and the only issue is, does the U.S. write the rules or does China write the rules? And we'll be better off if we're writing the rules. But what happens now? It looks like the trade bill, the bill giving the president trade promotion authority, as well as enforcement power and worker retraining programs, all passed the Senate a couple weeks back. The House basically killed them with a vote last week, but they are likely bringing it back up for a vote today, and they may split it into some different portions. So you basically have sort of three portions right now. You've got the enforcement provisions, you've got worker retraining, which is called trade adjustment assistance, and then you have that fast-track bill, trade promotion. So they will likely take it up in some pieces today and then send it back to the Senate. I am going to continue to support the president getting fast-track trade promotion authority as long as I get assurances that we will also pass worker retraining assistance and the enforcement provisions. And so I've got to get assurances that those will pass. That's been my condition from the very beginning. Exactly what those assurances are, that is the big question right now. But it does look like the House is poised to try again today, and they may break it into pieces and decide which comes first, which comes second. It's a little bit in flux.
I hope it goes down in flames. Now, can I get a commitment that your backing of fast track is separate from your independent analysis of TPP as a whole?
Yes, John, and actually, let's talk about that. If a deal is done on TPP, and it's probably going to be months into the future, but if a deal is done, it will be, I predict, the most transparent thing that Congress will vote on during my time up here. And the reason for that is, under the provisions in the fast-track bill that I'm supporting, any treaty negotiated, whether it's TPP or anything else, has to be put up on a web page for 60 days before the president signs it. And then once the president signs it, it doesn't go into effect. It just then goes to Congress for another, 45 to 60 days of debate before it's voted on. It can't be amended. So the version that's posted online for everybody to see, the press, the public, members of Congress, labor, environmentalists, everybody, is exactly what's going to be voted on. So it will be a highly transparent vote if that treaty comes to pass. And yes, I've already committed that I have a number of things I want to see in the bill and concerns I have about the bill. So I've committed to scrutinize it, but also to sit down and talk with, key groups of folks who have deep concerns about it or who support it. I'm going to take that 120-day process, and we're all going to look at it together and talk about it, and I'm only going to vote for a bill if I think it's a good deal for our country and will create jobs here.
That's all that we're asking, is that you take these independently, and we thank you for that. As you know, Senator, my predictions politically in Virginia and nationally are legendary, and without even comparison to anybody else. So my prediction for the 2016 Democratic ticket, Clinton Kaine. What do you think of that?
Well, people lose a lot of money on predictions, John. So I have a feeling that I'm going to be on the stage in January of 2017 watching President Clinton take the oath of office, but I'm going to be on the stage because I'm sitting with U.S. senators, and I'm planning on being here for a long time.
I think she's going to be the nominee. I think that's inevitable now, and I think she's going to pick you as the vice presidential candidate, and why not? So that's what I predict, and when I'm right, you'll come on my show, right?
I'm going to come on the show right or wrong.
And acknowledge that.
Whether I'm right or wrong, much less whether you're right or wrong.
Yeah, but I'm always right. The other thing I'm right on is this trade bill. It's a disaster. Thank you for being with us, Senator.
All right. Well, we're going to debate that one another day. But what we'll do is we'll debate it when there is a trade deal that's out on the table. That's the time when we have a debate. And hey, I'm sure we'll have some good debates about that.